Katherine, I just want to start by saying it's so wonderful to have you here with us today.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here. I love your podcast so much. I'm a huge fan.
Well, we are mutual admirers. Is that what they say? Because I also love your podcast. And for people who
Oh,
are listening to this podcast, if you don't know about the Good Hard Story podcast, you should check it out because Katherine does some awesome individual episodes where she does teaching, and then she also has fantastic guests,
oh,
occasionally, including me.
yeah, like you. And especially, I have an ongoing series called Ask Amy Julia, my resident disability theologian, where I made up a theme song. Would you like to hear it? Thank you. Yes, you would. Ask Amy Julia, ask Amy Julia. Got a hard question? Ask Amy Julia. Do you
I
know?
mean,
Oh my gosh, I have to tell you this. I was at a speaking event in Austin, Texas.
yes.
A lady rushes up to me and she says, I love you so much, Katherine. I flew here. This was the most direct flight from Canada, somewhere in central Canada,
Wow.
to meet you in Austin, Texas, because I'm such a fan. She immediately says, Ask Amy Julia. Ask
No.
Amy Julia. The way she identified me was by the Ask Amy Julia song. I am dead serious. You can ask Susan, who travels with me, who was there. It was wild.
Well, it is quite a memorable song, and I am delighted to hear that. That's amazing.
I know. I was blown away.
All right. Well, today I get to ask Katherine all sorts of questions because we are here to talk about your new book, which I have to say, so one of the perks of being a podcaster is that I get books for free. So I got this book for free, an advanced copy. And I am not even kidding that I have, in the meantime, ordered 10 of them because
Oh,
I have so many people I want to give it to. And no one's paying me to say this. That is just the honest truth. And I don't do that with most of my podcast guests, even though I love their books. But this is not only a really rich and beautiful book in its own right, but it's such a book to give to people. I know it's exactly what you wanted it to be, but we'll get there. Okay. So
we'll get there, but I'm with you. I was prepping for a conference I'm speaking at next weekend and reading some entries from the book to kind of try
mhm.
to summarize some concepts. And I'm upstairs weeping, thinking of the women in the room who need to hear what I'm about to say from this book.
No, it's so true. It's just, there's this real sense of, your other books are beautiful as well, but you can tell that this is 15 years into the journey. Like there's been time to
That's it.
really,
I know.
to really marinate and to really learn and to really grow and heal. So,
I
well,
feel
for anyone who does not know your story, let's start there, right? So can
yes.
you give us the short version of the Katherine Wolf Hope Heals story?
Absolutely. At 26 years old, with no medical history, no family history, completely typically able bodied before, with no prior symptoms, perfectly healthy in every way, and probably life, perfect life, at least
Mm,
in my very misguided thinking.
mhm,
Um, that I mistakenly would have called blessed, I'm sure.
mm.
Um, anyway, out of nowhere, I had a massive brainstem stroke from a birth defect that I never knew I had, but I was born with, that grew and grew on my brainstem and ruptured as a 26-year-old. And it nearly took my life. I would be in hospitals and rehabs for nearly 2 years afterwards, relearning basic function to eat and speak and walk again. And fast forward big time, I'm fairly disabled today. I cannot walk well unassisted. I use a wheelchair. I have a hand that doesn't work much. It has no fine motor. I have a paralyzed face. I have deafness in one eye, near deafness in one ear, near blindness in one eye, extreme double vision. So I'm seeing Amy Julia and Amy Julia right here, and many more health problems. are in this story,
Yeah.
but life is like awesome. I'm living the dream. Truly, my
Mm,
life is full of just absolutely amazing things, from a incredible husband to phenomenal children. Yes, I went on to have a second baby biologically. And my husband and I founded a summer camp that Amy Julia is an incredible teacher at each summer. And we're opening a coffee shop here in Atlanta. And we've written some books and talked a lot about it.
mm,
Is that
love
a
it.
good summary?
It's a great summary, and we're going to get into some of the details there. So yeah, I mean, I always love talking to you, but specifically today, I wanted to talk to you about this book. It's called Treasures in the Dark: 90 Reflections on Finding Bright Hope Hidden in the Hurting. And um, well, this book is structured in 3 parts, right? So there are 30 entries on the hurting, 30 for the healing, and 30 for the hoping. And
Yeah,
I thought I would, yeah,
you know the reason for that?
tell me.
I think you actually very much know because you've lived it. We who have lost and grieved much know that the whole notion of a linear devotional trajectory straight up is so ludicrous that
Mhm.
you need hurting and hoping and healing and the ability to choose your own adventure, because healing is not linear. You feel differently every day. You're all over the place. And grief is not like, oh, I've now tied the bow and move on to this new chapter of life that's all about just healing from where I've been. No, you're back into chapter one, and then you're at the last one. And by the way, I'm choosing not to call this a devotional, even though that's a great temptation, because devotional, to me at least, implies a maybe some church baggage and church hurt is present,
Mhm,
and you're
mhm,
wearing it out by devotional, or it implies that something can be neatly fixed with a bow if you just read this book, and it's
mm.
gonna make your mornings better and you're gonna, have this better day. No, nothing like that's promised. This is just a reflection guide, hopefully some providing a space to reflect and process, and hopefully heal your heart, but there's no guarantee.
Well, and I think you do a wonderful job of, although there is a structure to the book that somewhat has a progression, right? Starting with hurting and ending with healing. But
Yes,
at the same time, there is a sense of, yeah, circling back around and around, and the hope being possible in the midst of the hurt, and the healing being possible in the midst of the hope, and, all these things being intertwined. There was one place where you wrote, when I became disabled at 26, I forfeited the option to feign wellness. And then a
right,
little bit later down, every last one of us deserves the grace of the assumption that all is not well. I just thought that is such an amazing statement, that
right.
we give
It is not
grace
the
by
truth.
assuming that all is not well,
Right,
rather than just kind of pretending that everything is well all of the time. So, yeah,
totally. I
this is.
have um I have a dear friend, Brooke, who would always say, we all want a t-shirt that, and those of us in wheelchairs get the pass that says, all is not okay here.
Mhm,
Handle with care. I'm
yeah,
fragile. I've been through a lot. Like, for many wheelchair users, not always, there is a different level of care that the world sometimes treats us, but that's not afforded to you if you're in the grocery store and your mother just died. No one would know what you're going through. So yeah.
yeah. So it's interesting though, because it's like, on the one hand, assume, handle with care about everybody. And on the other hand, I know that there are people who make completely false assumptions about you based upon your physical appearance. And
Absolutely. So interesting. Yes.
so it's like this interesting, kind of, take me as I
Yeah.
am, but don't assume you know who I am.
Well, the whole thing is curiosity without
Mm,
assumption. I believe that
yeah,
we
yeah,
have got to stop assuming we know. We don't know. Be curious and not assume all is well or all is terrible. Let's
right.
talk to people. Let's ask and learn.
Well, so I wanted to ask you, there was this, well, this podcast is now named Reimagining the Good Life.
Reimagining the
And
Good Life. Of course I know that, Amy Julia. I've never missed an episode of your
I
podcast.
know, but it has a new name. Remember, it used to be called Love is Stronger Than Fear.
Yes, of course I knew that, and I love the new name. I love Reimagining the Good Life for 10,000 reasons.
Well, thank
So
you.
great.
I
Love it,
wanted to ask you about the good life because you have an entry in this book called The Good Life, and I'm going to
right?
quote you a little bit. The first thing you wrote was God was not, it seemed like God was not merely withholding a good life from me. He was taking my good life away from me.
Right.
And then you happen upon the words of a theologian from the 1500s, which I must say, I'm like, how did you find Sir Richard Baxter? But you can tell us about that. And then you wrote, I found there was a good life on the other side of my suffering. So I wondered if you could just tell us, how do you move from feeling like the good life is being taken away from you, to truly believing that you've been given a good life?
Yes, and you want me to tell you how I found Sir Richard Baker, right?
Yes, that too.
Absolutely. So Sarah Groves, do you know of Sarah Groves?
I
She's a
do. Yeah.
yeah, I love her deep. She's actually been to camp. I don't know if you've ever
Not
been
with
there.
me.
Been
No.
there. She's been the musician several years at
Mm.
Hope Hills Camp. She's a dear friend and like a rock star, literally. For those listeners who don't know, she's a just extremely talented musician out of Minneapolis. She wrote this beautiful song called "Open My Hands."
Hmm.
And she performed it at a conference where I was speaking. And I, rolled right up to her afterwards. And the song says, I believe in a blessing I don't understand. I've seen rain fall on the wicked and the just. Rain is no measure of his faithfulness. He withholds no good thing from us.
Hmm.
So I raced up to her and I'm like, Sarah, like I feel that deep in my gut, but I need you to explain how you got there. Like
Mm.
logically talk me through that. And she said she'd done kind of a deep dive and read a devotional by Charles Spurgeon from years ago where he quotes Sir Richard Baker
Okay.
saying the following. And basically, now I've tracked it down just to confirm that he did, in fact, say this. And keep in mind, in the 1600s, people are burying their children. Half
Right.
half of children would die at home.
Hmm.
So, like, for him to say these words, I mean, he's living through some rough times.
Yeah.
And he says that the good things of God, the truly good things of God, can never be taken because they're never withheld in the first place.
Mm.
The truly good things of God are peace of conscience, joy in the Holy Spirit, the fruition of his presence in this life, and the assurance of his face in the next. Of these things, we can know God will never withhold because they are nothing this world could ever touch.
Mm.
That Psalm 84:11, this is Katherine Wolf now, that Psalm 84:11 is actually completely true. God will withhold no good thing because the good thing is nothing of this world anyway. The truly good things are intangible. They're Jesus in our stories. When we know him, he's the goodie that's with us in the mess.
And so, in other words, like I mean, so much that we would call good was taken from you, right? Whether that was like the ability to swallow or I mean, any number of physical
Yeah,
abilities,
yeah,
you
totally.
know, and as well as
Oh,
just like
well,
future
yeah,
dreams and, all these different things. And yet there was also a goodness, that was not withheld, but then also it seems like there's just a goodness that has come out of your story. Well, this is another, you wrote, the moment I lost most of my physical abilities was the moment I met myself truly for the first time. And I
yeah.
just wanted to ask you to speak about, like, what do you mean that you didn't know yourself truly before then? And what did you learn when you met yourself truly?
Because even, I mean, I walked with the Lord since I was a child. So it wasn't like I was totally on zero, that my identity isn't my ability or my identity isn't my appearance or whatever. But on some very deep level, even as a good Christian soldier, I had believed like if I'm good, then I get the good stuff.
Mhm.
And even more than just believing that, I think there was some deep idolatry in my picture of the good life is actually the blessed life, the life that God is blessing me with. So that was all kind of slashed after the stroke. And what was left was recognizing truly that I, his true favor cannot be earned. It's on all of us in him. And like on some very deep level, I was obsessed with the earthly good life, that I
Mhm.
would never have said that in a million years, but the comforts of this world was what I was living for. Like to be accepted and, the star of the show of my
Mhm.
life. And quite a different story when you're a wheelchair user and you can't even do your life.
Yeah.
And yet, that's the beginning of truly knowing who you are, the value of your worth in Christ that surpasses anything you could ever do or earn. That's so silly.
I feel like you and I have like parallel stories in this weird way because I obviously have not had anything near the experience you've had with your stroke. And yet I was 28 when our daughter Penny was born and unexpectedly diagnosed with Down syndrome. And
Yes.
um, I think I would say that I similarly met myself truly for the first time. And for me, that began with what I have called, I'm sure listeners have heard me say this before, ugly grief, where there was this sense of like, there's an ugliness in my soul that I am having to confront for the first time because of how I have valued myself, how I've valued other people, what I have thought mattered.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Totally.
I then was able to go kind of deeper than the um ugly parts of myself that I had to come face to face with and start
Yeah.
to see that there's also a beauty there that has been given and that is not dependent upon my success and achievement in the world.
Right. And how valuable is that for young, capable, able bodied women to learn? And
Mhm. Mhm.
I don't know about you, Amy Julia, although I think I do know that you count it as this profound gift to
Oh, yeah.
have. Oh my gosh, me too. Like I feel like we unlocked a real secret code on the video game early in life, the video game of life early on. Like,
Yeah.
oh wait, I spoke yesterday to this precious group of largely 80-year-old women, almost
Mm.
all 80-year-old women. And I almost threw out all my material on the spot because I'm like, you lived long enough and you got it. You
Yeah.
know all the things I'm about to say. You know what really matters in life. You varied your friends at this stage.
Yeah.
You're just living a different deal than when I'm talking to 18-year-olds.
Right.
Because like the 85-year-old women, you don't have to tell them life's going to be hard. They get it. They know. You don't have to tell them that their dreams are not coming true. They already know that. You don't
Yep.
have to tell them that they get to choose how they feel about their story. They already know.
Yep.
It's really interesting. Well, I hope they already know that one. But by and large, they know what I'm talking about.
Right. And it's kind of like I don't know, there's a gift in learning that sooner and being able to navigate life with it. For
Well,
sure.
they say young suffering informs the way you live the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Just have a different lens when you've suffered at a young age. And actually, I forget where I read this, but that hospice nurses who have been polled on the top 5 regrets, people who are on their deathbed,
Yeah.
and 5 of the benefits that young sufferers say is like part of post-traumatic growth,
Hmm.
like intersect almost perfectly. That the things people say, deathbed regrets, and the things people experience when they suffer young afterwards and come out with post traumatic growth have
Yeah.
this strange, like compatible, like
Overlap. Huh.
yeah, overlap. Isn't that fascinating?
So
And
in other words, like,
I
can I
totally
spell this?
agree.
Like, so in other words, I'm on my deathbed and I've lived a life that didn't maybe include a ton of suffering, and I regret the fact that I didn't spend more time with my family. I've suffered young. I come into a post traumatic growth period, and I say, "Hey, I get a chance to like experience relationships, and that's what I'm going to go all in on that." Is that what you're
Exactly.
talking about? Okay.
And exactly, that on the deathbed, a regret would be I lost touch with my friends from when I was young,
Yeah.
and I missed out on that human connection or something in that vein. And exactly, a PTGer would
Hmm.
say, I'm not going to let that happen because life is so precious
Yeah.
because I almost lost it. Or, yes, you
Yeah.
get it.
Well, that is something that I think comes up in this book over and over and over again is just the precarity of life in general and the ways in which you, even 15 years after the stroke, know every single day that there's no guarantee. And I was something you've wrote in the book, and I've also heard you say before, is expect more of God and less of the world. And I
Yes.
wanted to like ask you to talk about that a little bit here because I feel like could be easy to look at your life and say, okay, you've had a stroke, you've had multiple pretty horrendous falls that have broken bones and torn ligaments, and you've discovered a rare neurovascular disorder that is life threatening in an ongoing way.
Yep.
It would be easy to look in at your life and be like, wait a second, why would you expect anything of God? Because
Right.
it seems
Anything
as though
good.
your life has simply been filled with, un predictable and unfair events. So what
Right.
do you mean when you say expect more of God and less of the world?
I think fascinating question. And so many times in all of our lives, regardless of what we are dealing with, we expect more of this world. We just think it's going to overwhelm us with how amazing it is. And we expect less of God. We're like, God may show up if he's there, if he cares. So the space between those is our place of deep discontentment.
Hmm.
We're miserable. But if we flip it and say, I'm going to expect more of God to show up, I believe in His word and His truth, and I'm clinging to it. And I know it kind of stinks, like less of this world is the reality. Then that space is joy. Like I'm
Hmm.
full of joy that I see it this way. They say the opposite of hurt is not hope. You hear that all the time, like hurt and hope would be opposites. That's not true. Mike Foster of the People of Second Chance, which is an organization I love in Southern California,
Hmm.
says that the opposite of hurt is hype, HYPE.
Hmm.
That hope is actually in the middle.
Hmm.
It's like the place you want to land. It's the balance. It's not hyping, but it's not hurting. It's believing and firmly based in reality. And that's where I want to live. And our expectations are killing it. We want to make more of how it's going to be instead of realistically understanding it's going to be rough. There are struggles of all kinds in this world. We will have trouble, it says
Yeah.
in John 16:33, but we can take heart because he's overcome the world.
Hmm.
And I think that sums it up.
Well, let's talk about hope a little bit. One of the other things that you write about is the habit of hope and the idea of kind of practicing hope. Can you like just talk about that? What does it mean to practice hope, to have hope
Absolutely.
as
I'm
a
a
habit?
huge fan of this. I'm a huge fan. I don't think you just wake up hopeful one day about your life. It is something you incorporate into your life and you practice and practice and practice. I feel like the practice of hope carried me when the feeling of hope failed me. And
Hmm.
that's a direct quote from the book that the habit of hope is it that when you hope and you hope and you hope, you keep hoping. It's a
Mhm.
routine, it's a ritual you get into. And I think practicing hope is a multi thronged notion that we practice hope by re narrating our situation. I'm very into re narration. Like, I get to decide how I feel about the story. I get to communicate the truth of the story as I see it to my children, to my husband, to my friends, to my world. I'm huge into Ebenezer's. I love like put up a lot of pictures and memories and look where we've been. Look how far God has brought us. To me, that is an act of hope. That is practicing hope. Habitual hope is remembering where you've been and where God has brought you. Should I keep going?
Yeah, give us a couple more if you've got
Oh,
them. I
sure.
think this would be great.
Sure. I'm huge into gratitude. I just think it changes. I mean, the neurobiology shows it changes the brain. It's a
Yeah.
thing. Yeah. And I do a ton of that. And I definitely think it has changed my brain.
Mm.
I make our kids on the way to school talk about what they're grateful for, and I record it every single day and an app on my phone. And Jay and I as well, because I'm into corporate gratitude.
Yeah.
It's not just for me. We're going to speak this out loud. What are we grateful for? Where have we been? Let's look back and be grateful. What's in our future? What can we have anticipatory gratitude for? What's to
Mm.
come? And I think that really changes how we feel. Goodness, another one is community.
Mm.
Whoa. Practicing hope is so much easier when other people are hoping for you, because you may not feel hopeful in any
Yeah.
moment of your story. But if you are in community with other people who are hoping, they hold up your shoulders, they hold up
Mm.
your arms, and they hope for you when you feel like you don't have hope. I've recently started a group called the Suffering Club, which I didn't know if that's what I wanted to call it, but
Mm.
my therapist says that's exactly what to call it. How beautiful. There's no such thing. Nobody calls a group the Suffering Club. Do
Right.
it. That's brilliant. And this group of women, largely birthed out of Hope Hills Camp women in Atlanta, it's beautiful, gathers and is going through the ringer. I mean, one girl in the group, one woman in the group has now buried her second child.
Mm.
Another woman in the group, husband has been cheating on her for 2 years.
Mm.
Another one in the group has a rare condition that the symptoms of, similar to ALS, will not present till her 60s, but she's living knowing it's coming. And her
Yeah.
mother has. It's just horrific.
Mm.
Um, I could go on and on. There are so many fascinating stories of deep suffering, and yet it's almost like a weight is lifting as we process together,
Mm.
as we make room for the Holy Spirit among us to just speak where we are, how we're doing, what are we grieving in this season, when like we're all grieving a lot of loss
Mm.
and slashed dreams, broken lives, truly. Like, and yet there's this deep brain healing happening. There's
Mm.
new neuro pathways being created just by being in a room with these women, and it's glorious. I would highly recommend plugging into community, which, by the way, people always want to say, just find your people, just go find your people. And I want to throw up when people say that, because, like, no, don't find your people. Find the people without the people and
Mm.
make them your people. That's
Mm.
finding your real people. Look for the outcasts. That's your people. Be a Jesus person. Don't go where everybody is. No, look for the lonely ones.
Yeah.
Befriend those people.
I love that, and it is Yes, so true that the sense of, and there's something that will actually, as you know, be given to you in that. I have another hope question for you. Like, how would you say hope is different from like toxic positivity or relentless optimism? Like because you've alluded to the fact that like suffering is still a part of the story, grief is still lament, like, but how do you hold that sense of hope not simply being, putting a bow on the hard things in life?
Totally. I'm near allergic to toxic positivity and all those things. What else did you ask about? Just optimism in general.
Relentless optimism, yeah.
Relentless optimism. I just think all of that will get you a couple inches towards anything meaningful that you need. Like to me, toxic positivity, ugh, because I am actually very positive and have a lot of optimism, but
Right.
they're firmly rooted in the person of Jesus and
Mm,
not in some weird secular thing that's going to last a couple weeks or something. But
mm,
also, I think positivity, optimism, all the real self-helpy things with no substance basically are all, and I don't mean no substance in it. There are great things in all those things. I just think they fall short when
mhm,
the rubber meets the road.
right.
Um, because in toxic positivity or relentless optimism, there's not a degree of recognizing reality.
Mhm,
I think true hope is recognizing how bad things are. Absolutely. It's not denial. It's not pretending all is well. It's the recognition. It's not, well, that's the whole reason we need hope, is it's not okay. But I have real hope that it will be one day.
mhm.
And that sustains today.
Well, and it does seem like there is something in staying with someone, whether that's yourself or someone else, like in the midst of suffering, not denying that or trying not to feel anything about it, while tethering yourself to a promise. There's something that happens there that really is, um, changes the present moment, even when it doesn't take away the suffering.
And it sustains you for that moment and
Hmm.
those moments, absolutely, because you're tethered to something beyond yourself. Praise
Yeah.
God, it's not all based on what I could do.
Mm,
I know all too well over and over from, as you mentioned, just repeated episodes of broken bones and brain scans and brain surgeries and all that, like, it would be real easy to come untethered if it wasn't something, Jesus. But since it's Jesus, he's not untethering,
right.
even when I may feel completely untethered.
Well, and it sounds like, yeah, one difference between hope and toxic positivity is the source of that, right?
Right.
Like that, just when you have an anchor for the soul that is both eternal and just steadfast, that is different than when it is, as you said, something that might work for a day or a week or and be based upon our human
Our human
capacities.
feeling.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Based on you, back to you, and you feel terrible. So then how does that work? If you're hating your life, how does it work to have toxic positivity?
Right.
It
Right.
doesn't.
Yeah, that is another form of denial, I guess. So I want to hear a little bit from you, just off the top of your head. Like, how have you learned to care for other people who are in the midst of pain? I know that's been a lot of your story over the past 15 years, especially in being in kind of public ministry in this, in a ministry called Hope Heals. So,
Oh yeah.
yeah, talk to me about like what, for anyone who's listening and who is wanting to care for someone who's in the midst
Oh,
of
for
one of
sure.
those hard
Yeah.
seasons. Like, how do you care for hurting people in the midst of their pain?
It is quite shocking. If anyone has any third cousins, neighbors, relatives, friend who knows Katherine Wolf, why don't we get her to make a personal phone call to someone in a hospital room deciding whether or not to turn off the machine on their loved one?
Right.
I'm only halfway kidding. Yes, I find myself in a whole lot of really deep, complicated suffering stories in the last nearly 16 years,
Yeah.
and most I feel entirely unqualified to speak into. And yet I also feel entirely qualified and up for the job at the very same time. I love it.
Mm.
I'm like, oh, really bad suffering? Great. I would love to get on the phone with them. And it's like really bizarre. So I have a lot to say about it. But in summary, until one allows circumstances to break their heart, there's no way to get past what's like. You're not ever going to be able to heal if you're not shook by what
Mm.
happened to you.
Mm.
I think some sort of denial and positive spin is so silly. The reality is, whoa, this is shocking. It's horrible. I cannot believe this happened to you.
Right.
Should be on the tip of the tongue, not some lovely platitude based in your deep theological, no, that's not now. Now is, I cannot believe you are dealing with this.
Yeah.
This is unimaginable. I can't believe I'm going to watch you bear this.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there is a deep ministry of tears. We
Mm.
all want to, talk about the ministry of truth. That's a thing, and that will come. Absolutely. We should be sharing the deep truth of Jesus to get out of bed in the morning. Absolutely. But not yet. In the moment of deep pain, cry. Let someone witness you with them. Let them witness your witness. Like, be in the room, show up, have tears if you have tears, be a shoulder to cry on. I like to say, less words are the best words
Mm.
for moments of suffering. People don't need platitudes. The reality is, when they have a bullet wound happen, they don't need a Jesus band aid. They're
Mm-hmm.
going to need a lot more of Jesus than a band aid,
Yeah.
and the time isn't right yet for that.
Yeah.
Save that one.
Mm.
The big old bandage they need comes first and foremost through tears, honestly.
Mm. Thank you for that. And I love that sense of, and it's a challenge, right? I mean, I think as you said, you practice it and it becomes less of a challenge in many ways, but to just be with people in the midst of unbearable pain and
Yeah,
say, I can't believe this is happening to you, and let me weep with you and be with you. Like
right.
I can stay with you in the midst of this pain it's an incredible gift.
The
And one.
very most meaningful sentiment to me in my entire ordeal is 5 years after the stroke, when I had to have an aneurysm, an unrelated brain aneurysm removed. A friend said to me, I cannot believe this is happening to you.
Mm-hmm.
And like, for some reason, I felt so seen and
Yeah.
known, and like, yes, me either. I just can't believe it. I cannot wrap my mind around this. How can this keep happening? And
Right.
I just felt so like, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for just not believing this too, because it's shocking and my
Yeah.
world is ravaged. And thank you. And
Mm.
I think we can do that for each other.
Yeah. I have one last question for you as we come to the end of our time. I thought this was a really interesting point and it makes a lot of sense to me, but I'd love to hear you talk about it a little bit. You wrote, healing rarely returns us to the condition in which we started. And I think we usually think that healing will, like, that's kind of our impression of healing is like, oh yeah, just go back to how I was. And so I just thought maybe you could talk a little bit about what healing has looked like for you
Oh,
over
for
these past
sure.
16 years.
Fascinating, isn't it? For
Yeah.
many reasons. Clearly, um, you know, for instance, question, did I get the miracle? Did I get the healing?
Right.
Did I? Fascinating. Not a thing that was broken after the stroke has been fully restored to
Mhm.
back to the way it was before. Not a thing. And yet, am I healed? Interesting thought. I mean, I could make a pretty compelling argument for yes, that the healing has come. That
Mhm.
what was most deeply wounded was the soul, the heart. My feelings were so hurt
Mhm.
after this happened. How could God let this happen to me? Look at my life. My everything is broken and ravaged.
Yeah.
And I don't feel that at all anymore.
Mhm.
It is it's almost hard to deeply empathize with people in their moments of terrible pain because I'm like, well, I mean, you kind of were seeing the other side, and I'm sure you kind of recognize it's pretty awesome drinking this Kool-Aid, and it's crazy. We see in John 9, which if you haven't read John 9, go home and read it, listeners. So powerful that in John 9, the man born blind is cured of his blindness, his
Mhm.
physical blindness. There's a curing for sure. But the real healing happens when he puts his faith in Jesus, when he
Mhm.
believes in Jesus. If it was merely about the curing of something wrong with his body, the entire chapter would only be the first 7 verses. There's another 35 after that. That the whole spiritual blindness of the Pharisees comes in. Then I believe the spiritual blindness of the now formerly blind guy
Yeah.
whose life is still terrible until he meets the one that makes life not terrible anymore.
Mhm.
The deepest need of that dude and this girl and everybody in the world is the healing that Jesus provides, not
Mhm.
anything else. That's all counterfeit.
Mm.
Did that remotely answer your question?
Yeah, it does. I think just that sense of the healing that God offers to us is very often not what we would think healing is going to look like.
Absolutely. Everybody I knew assumed, oh, give it a couple years. She'll be wearing high heels again. She'll be running around, running on the beach.
Mhm.
Like she'll be taking that stroller into the mall after she pulls up. Like, of course, give it a couple years. She's got to do a little more physical therapy and then the years started going by. And here I am at 16 years. And not much has changed. In fact, I've had to upgrade from just a cane to a walker now. So pretty rapidly, things are not headed uphill here. And and yet my heart's headed that way.
Right. I mean that and actually those two things are probably somehow related to each other.
I agree. I
That
agree
if
with
you
that
had
statement.
been given back, like, kind of full bodily movement, whatever, this would all be something that certainly you learned from and were grateful for, but it would not be not only this degree of transformation for you, but also for, the hundreds of thousands of people who've heard your story.
Oh well, yeah. I don't know about hundreds of thousands, but exactly, Amy
I
Julia,
think
you're
hundreds of
exactly
thousands,
right.
I do.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, you're a sweet fan. Yeah, right.
Mm,
But you're exactly right. Yeah, I think that those must go hand in hand beautifully. That the
yeah.
lack of physical curing of this earth suit and the deep healing of the soul must kind of be, yeah, parallel tracks of something. I don't know, something beautiful.
Well, I know we have to go. I'm going to say one more thing that I wasn't planning to say, but I was just thinking about that. I heard somebody say the other day, our bodies are not all that we are, but our bodies are how we are made visible in the world.
Yeah,
That, like, we would be invisible without our bodies. And it doesn't mean we wouldn't exist without our bodies, but, like, we would be invisible. And I think it's so interesting to think of the visible body. And as you have talked everything about invisible wheelchairs and that sense of even what we started talking about, that, like, so many people show up and they need a t-shirt to be like, I'm actually not okay.
right.
And that your visible body actually proclaims something true, not just about you, but about all of us. And there's something, like, almost sacramental about that.
I totally agree. I think that's a fascinating point. I had to make peace with like this body is the only one I'm ever going to have. And this body, all of our bodies, are the only way we interface with existence,
Yeah.
for all of existence. This is it.
Yep.
So, yes, a paralyzed face and balance that doesn't work, and a hand that doesn't work, and a gait that doesn't work, and brokenness, I guess, like, but this is how I interface with what is here in the goodness of God in the land of the living. And this is what I got.
Well, and I will add though to that list of what you bring in your body, you also bring joy and peace and beauty and hope and love. I mean, I'm serious. And so that I think is what's even um more, there's like, that's where the truth of it all is in this evident, as you said, brokenness and evident wholeness all at
Right.
the same time.
I'm very aware when I'm speaking that the medium is the message. Me on the stage in a wheelchair proclaiming with one vocal cord and a paralyzed face the truth of God in a story speaks way beyond what this broken, messed up sound could proclaim. That,
Mhm.
I mean, whoa, the word picture, the medium is message, truly.
Well, thank you, Catherine, just for sharing a little bit of that message with us today. And I will just say it again, this book, I mean, even the title, Treasures in the Dark, right? I know it comes from Isaiah, but
You want me to say it? It's
yeah, why
Isaiah.
don't we end there? End with it. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And I have loved this passage for many years. So it's so special. It's the title. Isaiah 45:3 says, God says, I will give you hidden treasure in the darkness, riches stored in secret places, so that you may know that I am God, the God of Israel, the God who summons you by name.
Amen. And thank you.
Amen.